Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to sit down and have a very long, very detailed, very immersive conversation about one of the most extraordinary animated films to come out of the Walt Disney Animation Studios in the past 2 decades. The movie is called Encanto. It was released in the year 2021. And if you have seen it, you already know that this is not just a movie. It is an experience. It is a story that gets inside you and stays there long after credits have finished rolling. It is the kind of film that makes you think about your own family, your own childhood, your own wounds, and your own sense of belonging in a way that very few movies of any genre, animated or otherwise, manage to achieve. Let us start with the basics. Encanto was directed by Byron Howard and Jared Bush. Byron Howard is the same director who gave us Tangled and Zootopia, both of which are among the finest Disney animated films of the modern era. Jared Bush co-directed Zootopia with Howard, and also worked on Moana. These two men have a strong track record of making animated films that are visually beautiful, emotionally sophisticated, and culturally specific. Encanto is arguably the best work either of them has ever made, and the fact that they made it together gives the film a kind of creative confidence and coherence that is rare. The screenplay for Encanto was written by Jared Bush and Cherise Castro-Smith. Cherise Castro-Smith is a Cuban-American playwright and screenwriter, and her influence on the script is felt throughout in the way the film handles the complexity of family dynamics and the nuanced portrayal of a Lading's household. The music for the film was written entirely by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and we will spend a great deal of time talking about the music because it deserves that attention. The film was produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney Pictures. It is a theatrical release, not a streaming original. It came to theaters in the United States on November 24th, 2021. That date is significant because it was Thanksgiving weekend, which is traditionally one of the strongest box office weekends of the year. The film later arrived on the Disney Plus streaming platform on December 24th, 2021, exactly 1 month after its theatrical debut. The unusually short theatrical window was a reflection of the business realities of the post-pandemic era, when studios were still figuring out how to navigate between theatrical and streaming releases. It is important to be clear that Encanto is not part of any cinematic universe. It does not connect to any other Disney animated film in terms of plot or mythology. It does not have a prequel or sequel. It stands entirely alone as a single, self-contained story. And in an era when studios are increasingly obsessed with shared universes and franchise building, there is something refreshing and confident about a film that simply tells its story and trusts that story to be enough. The genre of the film is animated musical fantasy. If you enjoy animated films that have beautiful songs written by gifted composers, magical worlds built with extraordinary visual imagination, emotional storytelling that does not condescend to its audience, and cultural specificity that feels genuine rather than performative, then Encanto was made precisely for you. The story is set in Colombia, in South America. This is an extraordinary and important detail. Disney has made films set in Japan, China, France, Germany, Denmark, Scotland, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, Polynesia, and Mexico. But until Encanto, they had never made a film set in Colombia. And they had never made a film this deeply immersed in Colombian culture, language, geography, botany, architecture, clothing, food, and music. The filmmakers sent research teams to Colombia. They visited the coffee region, the Caribbean coast, the Andean highlands. They studied the colonial architecture of towns like Salento and Baricura. They consulted with Colombian historians, artists, musicians, botanists, and fashion designers. The level of cultural research and care that went into this film is extraordinary, and it shows in absolutely every frame. The basic premise of the movie is this. There's a family called the Madrigals. They live in a magical home called the Casita, which is located in a magical place called the Encanto, a hidden valley somewhere in the mountains of Colombia. The Encanto was created by a miracle, a magical candle that has been burning for 50 years, and that gives each magical child a unique magical gift on the day of their 5th birthday. One child can make flowers bloom wherever she walks. Another has the strength of 10 horses. Another can heal any injury or illness with the food she cooks. Another can communicate with animals. Another can control the weather with her emotions. Another can shapeshift into any person she has seen. Another has hearing so powerful she can hear a pin drop in a neighboring village. But one young woman in this family did not receive a gift. Her name is Mirabel Madrigal. She is 15 years old. She wears round glasses. She has wild curly hair. She has a warm and funny and generous spirit. And she is the only Madrigal who went to the gift ceremony and received nothing. No power. No magical door. Just a blank wall and a room full of family members staring at her with confusion and pity. The story of Encanto is really the story of Mirabel. It is a story of what it means to feel extraordinary in a world that measures worth by obvious, visible, demonstrable talents. It is a story of a family that has been broken by the very miracle that was supposed to protect it. And it is a story of what it takes, truly takes, to heal the wounds that pass from one generation to the next. Now, before we go any further into the story itself, let's spend a moment understanding the cultural and historical context that the film is operating in, because that context enriches everything that follows. Colombia has a long and complex history. It is a country of extraordinary natural beauty, incredible biodiversity, rich indigenous and African and Spanish cultural traditions, and also a history marked by violence, displacement, and conflict. The film does not address this history directly in the sense that it does not name specific historical events, but it draws on it deeply. The story of Abuela Alma and her husband Pedro, the story of families forced to flee their homes by violent men, the story of building a new life in a hidden and protected place. This is a story that resonates deeply with the lived experience of many Colombian families. The magical realism of the story, the way the supernatural and the everyday coexist naturally, is also deeply connected to a tradition in Colombian and broader Latin American literature and storytelling. The most famous practitioner of that tradition is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Colombian Nobel Prize-winning author of 100 Years of Solitude. That book is about a family, the Buendia family, living in a magical town called Macondo in Colombia, across multiple generations, and the way their history and their magic are intertwined. The parallels between Garcia Marquez's vision and the world of Encanto are not accidental. The filmmakers were inspired by that tradition, by the idea that in Colombia, magic and reality have always lived next to each other. With all of that in mind, let's now go into the full story. The plot. The movie opens with a sequence that is immediately charming and immediately reveals both the joy and the complexity of what we are about to experience. We see a young woman sitting in a bright, colorful room. She is drawing a sketchbook, surrounded by vibrant images and decorations. She has round glasses and wild, dark, curly hair, and she is wearing a white top and a beautiful embroidered skirt. This is Mirabel Madrigal. She is our narrator. She is going to tell us about her family. And she begins to do exactly that in a breathless, energetic, utterly delightful opening musical sequence called a family madrigal. In this song, Mirabel introduces us to her entire extended family, describing each person's magical gift with kind of enthusiastic tour guide energy that is immediately endearing. She talks about her grandmother, Abuela Alma, the matriarch of the family. She talks about her tia Julieta, who can heal anyone with her cooking. She talks about her tia Pepa, who controls the weather with her emotions. She talks about her cousins Dolores, who can hear anything, and Camilo, who can become anyone. She talked about her powerful sisters Luisa, who can lift mountains, and Isabela, who makes flowers bloom wherever she goes. But every time someone in the village asks Mirabel what her gift is, something interrupts her answer. A child runs by, a flower blooms, a cloud passes. She never quite gets the answer. The joke is obvious and gentle and warm at first, but also carries something underneath it, a quiet ache, an avoidance. Mirabel does not answer because the answer is nothing, and saying nothing in a family where everyone is something feels like an admission of failure. After this opening number, the film drops us fully into the world of the Encanto. The village is a paradise. It is lush and colorful and alive with magic. The Casita, the Madrigal family home, is an architectural wonder, a sprawling, vibrant structure that seems to breathe and move and respond. And it does, because the Casita is alive. It is not just a house. It is a character. It has a personality. It helps and meddles and comforts and occasionally argues. Tiles lift when someone needs a step up. Drawers open when something is needed. Doors close gently when someone needs privacy. The Casita is perhaps the most unusual and delightful character in a film full of unusual and delightful characters. We spend some time in this opening act simply being in the world, meeting the family, feeling the texture of daily life in the Encanto. And it is a rich and warm and sometimes overwhelming texture. This is a household where Tia Peepa's anxiety about the weather can cause a sudden indoor rainstorm, where Luisa is constantly being asked to do heavier and heavier chores with her supernatural strength, where Isabela moves through every room leaving a trail of perfect flowers that everyone admires and that you get the sense she is a little tired of making. Then comes the first truly significant event of the film, Antonio's gift ceremony. Antonio is Mirabel's young cousin. He is the son of Tia Pepa and Tio Felix, and he is about to turn 5. His gift ceremony is approaching, and the whole family is excited. For everyone in the family, the gift ceremony is a moment of joy and celebration and pride. For Mirabel, every gift ceremony is a reminder of what happened at her own ceremony 10 years ago. The film shows us that ceremony in a brief but devastating flashback. Little Mirabel, maybe 5 years old, dressed in white, walking toward a magical door that will be hers. The candle glowing, the family gathered, the expectation in the air. She reaches out to touch the doorknob, and something happens. Or more precisely, something does not happen. The magic flickers and fades. The door disappears. The candle dims. And little Mirabel stands there alone, reaching for something that is no longer there, while her entire family watches in stunned silence. Abuela Alma steps forward and holds Mirabel close, and you can see in Abuela's face a complicated mixture of love and pain and something else, something harder to name. Fear, perhaps, or grief. This flashback is only a few seconds long, but it is enormously effective. It tells us everything we need to know about why Mirabel is the way she is. She has been carrying this wound her whole life. She has been told she is loved and included. But she has also seen every one of her relatives get a magical door with their face on it, and their own magical room. And she has none of these things. She has a room that is just a room. No magic, no door. Just a girl and her sketchbook. Now back to the present. Antonio's gift ceremony arrives, and it is a beautiful, joyful event. The whole village comes. The family gathers. Antonio is adorable and nervous, and Mirabel is the one who holds his hand and walks him to the door when he is too scared to go alone. This is a small but telling detail. She is the one who can walk with him and comfort him because she knows exactly what it feels like to approach that door with hope and fear at the same time. Antonio touches the doorknob, and the magic responds. His door becomes extraordinary, covered in carvings of animals. He opens it, and a vast magical jungle appears inside. Jaguars and toucans and capybaras, and all manner of creatures come rushing out to greet him. He can speak to animals. He can understand them. The magic is beautiful and abundant, and the family erupts in celebration. But during the celebration, in a moment that nobody else seems to notice, Mirabel sees something terrifying. She looks at the walls of the casita, and she sees cracks. Not small hairline cracks, but spreading, branching cracks that run across the tiles and up the walls. The candle at the heart of the house seems to flicker. The magic seems to strain. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, the cracks disappear. Everything looks normal again. But Mirabel saw it. She knows what she saw. And this is the moment that sets the entire story in motion. She goes to her grandmother immediately and tells her what she witnessed. She describes the cracks, the flickering of the candle, and Abuela Alma listens carefully and then does something that becomes one of the central frustrations of the first half of the film. She dismisses it. She tells Mirabel that everything is fine. She tells her that the magic is strong. She tells her not to worry. And in her eyes you can see that she is not entirely convinced by her own reassurances, but she is committed to maintaining belief that the miracle is intact, because the alternative is too frightening to consider. And here begins the central tension of Act 1. Mirabel knows something is wrong. The people in authority around her do not believe her, or do not want to believe her, and she has to decide what to do with that knowledge. This is a classic setup of many great stories. The person who sees the truth that others cannot or will not see. But what makes Encanto different is that the reason others cannot see it is not stupidity or malice. It is fear. And fear, the movie knows, is much harder to argue with than ignorance. Mirabel decides to investigate on her own. She is going to figure out what is happening to the magic, even if she has to do it without anyone's help. And this investigation takes her into some of the most emotionally rich territory in the film. Her first avenue of inquiry is her sister Luisa. We have already met Luisa briefly in the opening sequences. She is big and strong and capable and cheerful. But Mirabel notices that Luisa seems tired. More than tired. Strained. There is something underneath her cheerful exterior that does not quite add up. Mirabel asks Luisa directly if she is okay, and Luisa gives her the expected response. Of course she is fine. Everything is fine. She is strong and she can handle it. But Mirabel pushes. She asks again. She sits with her sister. And something cracks, not in the wall this time, but in Luisa herself. What follows is the song Surface Pressure, and it is one of the great musical moments in contemporary animated cinema. Luisa begins to describe what it actually feels like to be her, to be the strong one, to be the one everyone depends on, to be the person who is called on to move mountains, literally and figuratively, every single day. The song builds from a relatively controlled beginning into something frantic and overwhelming. She describes the weight of expectation. She talks about what would happen if she could not perform, if she cracked, if she admitted that she needed help or rest or kindness. The terror she feels at that possibility is visceral and real. The visual sequences during the song are brilliant, showing Luisa carrying impossible loads, holding up crumbling structures, being pulled in 100 different directions, all while trying to maintain a smile. Surface Pressure became one of the most talked about songs of the film for a reason that goes well beyond its musical quality. It captured something that many people feel in their own lives but rarely hear articulated so precisely. The experience of being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who holds everything together, and who is therefore not allowed to fall apart. Parents of multiple children recognized it immediately. Oldest siblings recognized it. Caretakers recognized it. People in demanding jobs recognized it. The song went viral because it was emotionally true in a way that transcended the specific character or story it was written for. Luisa also tells Mirabel something important during their conversation. She confirms that something has been off, that her powers have been feeling different, less reliable, less strong. The cracks in the magic are not just in the walls. They are in the gifts themselves. Armed with this information, Mirabel digs deeper. She starts to search the Casita for more clues, and she discovers, through a series of investigations that involve secret passages and the helpful assistance of a few small animals, that the problem might be connected to something the family never discusses, a prophecy, and that prophecy might be connected to a person the family never discusses either, Bruno. Now, let us pause here for a moment, because Bruno deserves a proper introduction before we talk about what Mirabel finds. Bruno Madrigal is one of Abuela Alma's 3 children. He is the brother of Julieta, who is Mirabel's mother, and Peppa, who is the aunt who controls the weather. Bruno had the gift of prophetic vision. He could see the future. He would perform a ritual involving green sand and a meditative state, and he would receive visions of what was to come. These visions manifested as shards of green glowing material, like pieces of magical glass, that could be assembled to reveal what he had seen. But Bruno's gift was perhaps the most misunderstood and most punished gift in the family's history, because the future is often uncomfortable. People do not always want to know what is coming, and Bruno, with the best of intentions, would share what he saw, and people would be upset by it. A vision of rain on a wedding day, a vision of someone's business failing, a vision of bad luck. Bruno was not causing these things. He was only reporting them. But people confused the messenger with the message. They blamed him for his visions. They treated him as a bad omen rather than as someone with a difficult and lonely gift. Eventually, the family began to distance themselves from Bruno. The community began to avoid him. And one day, many years before the events of film, Bruno disappeared. He was gone. His room was sealed. His name became something the family avoided. The phrase "we do not talk about Bruno" became something of a family mantra, a way of protecting themselves from the discomfort of thinking about him. There is a song that shares this name. We don't talk about Bruno, and it is a cultural centerpiece of the entire film. In this song, almost every member of the Madrigal family takes a verse to describe their memory of Bruno. Each verse is sung in a different musical style that reflects the personality of the singer. Peppa delivers her verse in a slightly frantic, weather-affected style, describing how Bruno mentioned rain on her wedding day and ruined the atmosphere. Dolores delivers her verse in an almost whispery, breathless way, revealing disturbing details about visions Bruno had for various people in the village. A man who grew enormous, a woman whose fish went bad. Camillo delivers a theatrical, almost cartoonishly dramatic verse. Isabela delivers hers with cool, practiced elegance. And then there are the townspeople, various villagers who add their own Bruno stories, each one building on the last. The genius of We Don't Talk About Bruno is structural. It is a song about avoidance that cannot help but talk about the thing it claims to avoid. Every verse is another example of Bruno being discussed, being remembered, being blamed. The family has not actually processed their feelings about Bruno. They have just agreed to suppress them. And the song exposes this beautifully. It is funny and catchy on the surface, and quietly devastating underneath. It became one of the most streamed songs of 2022. It topped the Billboard Hot 100 chart, the first Disney song to do so in decades. It was sung everywhere, in schools and offices and cars and living rooms around the world. But back to Mirabel's investigation. She finds evidence that Bruno left behind a vision before he disappeared, a vision involving her. She searches further and eventually, crawling through the secret passages of Casita walls, she finds something extraordinary. She finds Bruno. He is still in the house. He never left. He has been living in the walls of Casita for years, hidden away, surviving in a cramped but surprisingly organized space. He has built little structures. He has decorated his space with found objects. He has, in one of the film's most charming and funny details, been performing an ongoing telenovela with a group of rats, playing all the roles himself and assigning roles to the rats based on their personalities. He has named the rats. He has storylines going. He is completely devoted to his little rat production, and he is terrified when Mirabel finds him. This reveal is handled with wonderful care and sensitivity. Bruno is not a villain. He is not mysterious or threatening. He is a lonely, anxious, deeply loving person who has been punishing himself for years for a crime he did not commit. He believed that his presence was harmful. He believed that his family was better off without him. He left not because he stopped caring, but because he cared too much. He could not bear to keep hurting them with his visions. But he never truly left. He has been in the walls, listening to the family, watching them through cracks in the plaster, present but invisible, loving them from the shadows. This is perhaps the saddest image in the whole film. A man who believes he is unwanted, who voluntarily exiles himself, but who cannot bring himself to truly go because his love for his family is too strong. Bruno tells Mirabel about the vision he had before going into hiding, the vision he had that involved her. He shows her the pieces of it, the shards of green glass that he smashed and hid because the vision frightened him. He and Mirabel piece it together, and what they see is ambiguous and unsettling. Mirabel stands at the center of the vision. In one reading of it, the Casita is whole and glowing and everything is restored. In another reading, the Casita is in ruins and everything is lost. The vision seems to hinge on something involving Isabela. Mirabel decides that whatever the key is, it must involve her and her sister connecting in a new way. She must go to Isabela. Now let's talk about the relationship between Mirabel and Isabela, because it is one of the most emotionally complex and ultimately most satisfying relationships in the film. On the surface, the relationship is one that many siblings will recognize immediately. Isabela is the older sister who has always seemed to have everything. She is beautiful. She is graceful. She is talented. She is the one Abuela favors. She is going to marry the most handsome man in the village. She is perfect in every apparent way. And Mirabel, the younger sister without a gift, has spent years in the shadow of that perfection, not with hatred, exactly, but with a kind of exhausting envy that she has never quite allowed herself to fully acknowledge. But the movie is not interested in a simple older sister versus younger sister conflict. It is interested in something much more nuanced, because Isabela, it turns out, is also suffering. Deeply, Mirabel approaches Isabela and tries to connect with her. She tries to be genuine and kind, But Isabela initially resists. She has her armor up. She is Isabela. She does not have problems. She does not crack. She is perfect. But Mirabel pushes through. She says something honest and vulnerable. She admits that she has always envied Isabela. And in that admission, something shifts. Isabela begins to crack too. And what comes out of that crack is not ugliness or anger. It is joy. Because what Isabela has been suppressing her whole life is not negativity. It is freedom. Isabela begins to admit that she does not always want to make roses. She wants to make cacti. She wants to make strange drooping vines and wildly colored shapes and weird plants that do not look like anything a perfect golden child is supposed to make. She has been creating beautiful, conventional flowers for years because that is what the family expects. That is what the community admires. That is what Abuela approves of. But her real creative self wants to make something wilder and stranger and more authentically her. This conversation breaks open into the song What Else Can I Do? And it is an explosion of visual and musical joy. Isabela starts creating plants she has never made before. Enormous red blooms, strange hanging mosses, purple and orange, and shapes that seem to defy botanical classification. She is laughing and spinning and creating, and for the first time in the film, she looks genuinely happy. Not performatively happy. Truly happy. The visual design of this sequence is extraordinary. The contrast between the perfect, conventional flowers Isabela has always made and the wild, chaotic, gloriously strange plants she creates in this moment of liberation is visually stunning and emotionally precise. But this moment of joy is interrupted. Abuela Alma walks in. She sees the mess. She sees Mirabel covered in pollen and strange plants. She sees Isabela disheveled and joyful in a way that does not fit the image Abuela has always projected for her. And Abuela does what frightened people who love their families often do. She blames. She turns to the most available target and she says this is wrong. This is dangerous. The magic is at risk, and it is Mirabel's fault. This accusation lands hard because it is not entirely out of nowhere. From Abuela's perspective, every time there's been disorder or trouble, Mirabel has been nearby. Abuela is not acting out of cruelty. She is acting out of terror. But the impact on Mirabel is devastating. And this is where Mirabel finally, after years of trying to be patient and understanding and accommodating, breaks. She does not yell. She does not have a tantrum. She speaks clearly and painfully and honestly. She tells her grandmother that she is not the problem. She tells her that the family is cracking, that everyone is suffering, that Luisa is exhausted, that Isabela has never been truly happy, that Bruno had to disappear because he felt unwanted. She says all of this with love and grief underneath every word, but she says it without flinching. And then something happens that seems to confirm Abuela's worst fear. The casita begins to fall apart. The cracks spread everywhere. The candle goes out. The magic dies. The house collapses in a cascade of beautiful and terrible motion. The family loses their powers. Isabela's flowers wither. Luisa's strength fades. Dolores can hear only ordinary things. Camilo cannot shift. The magic is gone. And the house, the beautiful living magical casita, is rubble. The community stands and watches. The family stands in the wreckage. And Mirabel runs. She runs into mountains, heartbroken and full of guilt and grief, and the terrible feeling that maybe she really was a problem after all. Mirabel runs through the jungle and the mountains. She does not have a destination. She is just running from the pain. And eventually she stops at a river. And sitting at the river is her grandmother. Abuela Alma is also alone. She also ran. She also could not face the wreckage she is responsible for. The wreckage. This scene, the scene at the river between Mirabel and Abuela Alma, is the heart of the entire movie. Everything in the film has been building to this moment. And the way it is handled is so careful, so honest, so free of easy villainization or cheap resolution that it genuinely takes your breath away. Abuela begins to tell Mirabel her full story. Not the version Mirabel already knows, the magical miracle version, but the real version, the human version. She tells her about the village where she grew up, about Pedro, the man she loved and married, the man who was kind and gentle and brave. She tells her about the night they had to flee, about holding their 3 newborn babies and running through the darkness while their village burned behind them, about Pedro turning back to face the men who were pursuing them, about watching her husband die to give his family a chance to escape. She tells Mirabel what it felt like to be left alone in the world with 3 newborn babies and nothing else. To be a young woman who had just watched the person she loved most sacrifice everything, standing at the edge of a river with nowhere to go. And then the miracle happening, the candle blazing to life, the valley rising to protect them, the house appearing, the community finding them, other displaced families finding shelter in the magical Encanto. She tells Mirabel how terrified she was that it would all disappear, that the miracle would be taken away, that the men who destroyed their first home would find them again, that everything she had been given would be ripped from her hands, just as Pedro had been ripped from her arms. And she tells Mirabel how that fear, that deep and never-healed fear, became the lens through which she saw everything, how she began to demand perfection and performance from her family, not because she did not love them, but because she loved them too much and was too afraid of losing them, how she made them into tools of the miracle rather than simply letting them be her beloved grandchildren and children, how she could not see what she was doing until the thing she was most afraid of happened, and the miracle broke anyway, not because of an outside enemy, but because of the pressure she had put on everything herself. She tells Mirabel she is sorry. She says she can see that Mirabel has always been exactly what the family needed, someone who sees clearly, someone who loves without requiring magic in return, someone who was brave enough to say the truth when no one else would. She says she is sorry that she could not see Mirabel for who she was, that she was too afraid to look. And Mirabel, who has every reason to be angry, who has been hurt by this woman for years, does something remarkable. She chooses love. She wraps her arms around her grandmother. She does not pretend the hurt did not happen. She does not offer cheap forgiveness that papers over the truth, but she chooses to stay in connection, to stay in the relationship, to begin the work of rebuilding together. This moment is the thematic climax of the film. The central message of Encanto is delivered here, not in a speech or a lesson, but in a gesture, in a grandmother and granddaughter holding each other by a river, both of them seeing each other clearly for the first time. After this scene, the film moves into its final act of healing and rebuilding. The family begins to come back together. They find each other in the rubble. They see each other without the armor of their gifts for the first time. Luisa is not strong. Isabella's flowers are gone. Camillo cannot shapeshift. And without their gifts, without the things that defined them and separated them and sometimes isolated them, they are just people, just family, just human beings who love each other and have been afraid of each other and need each other. Bruno returns. He comes out of hiding and walks back into the family. And his sisters, Pepa and Julieta, do not need a long explanation or a formal reconciliation. They just hug him. Pepa causes a brief rainstorm because of course she does, because she is so overwhelmed with emotion that the sky opens up, but then the sun comes back, too, because she is also happy. The community begins to help rebuild the Casita, and this is a beautiful and meaningful sequence. The magical family has always served the community. Julieta healed their injuries. Luisa moved their heavy things. The magic of the Encanto has always flowed from the family outward to the people who live nearby. But here the flow reverses. The community comes to help the family. They bring materials and tools and food and willing hands. They build together. And as they build, something begins to happen. Something magical. The cracks begin to heal. Not in the walls, because there are no walls yet, but in the relationships, in the connections between family members, in the space between Mirabel and Abuela Alma, in the way Bruno is welcomed back, in the way Isabela stands straighter, freer, more herself, in the way Luisa laughs without a mountain on her back for the first time in years. A new door appears in the frame of the front door, Mirabel's door, with her face on it, and Abuela hands her the magical doorknob. Mirabel places it in the door. She turns it, and the Casita comes back to life, fully and gloriously and with even more energy than before. The magic returns to every family member. But this time it feels different. The flowers Isabela makes are wild and strange and wonderful. Luisa's strength comes back, but it feels lighter, chosen rather than demanded. The final moments of the film are joyful and warm. The family celebrates in their restored home. Bruno is properly home. Dolores gets Mariano, who she has silently loved for so long. Mirabel's door is there. Her room is magical. Her place in the family is secured in a way it never was before. Not because she earned a gift, but because the family finally grew enough to truly see her. Character analysis. Let us now go much deeper into the characters themselves, because the characters are where so much of the emotional richness of this film lives. Mirabel is voiced by Stephanie Beatriz, who is an Argentinian-American actress known for her role as Rosa Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The casting is inspired because Beatriz brings both the comedy and the emotional depth that the role requires. Mirabel has to be funny and relatable and warm in a very short amount of time, so that the audience is completely invested in her emotional journey. Beatriz achieves this seemingly effortlessly. What makes Mirabel such a compelling protagonist is the specific nature of her wound. She is not, strictly speaking, an orphan or a child who has never known love. Her family loves her. Her parents adore her. There is warmth in her household. But she has been made to feel, never quite directly but always unmistakably, that she is less than, that her place in the family is contingent or precarious, that her love and her presence are not enough on their own, that she needs to be extraordinary in some measurable way to fully belong. This is a kind of wound that is very common in real life and very rarely portrayed with accuracy and nuance in family films. It is not the dramatic wound of the orphan or the abused child. It is the quiet, accumulating wound of the person who feels invisible in a crowd of people who claim to see them, the person who has been loved but not truly known. Mirabel's experience is familiar to anyone who has ever felt like the odd one out in their own family, and the film honors that experience rather than minimizing it. Mirabel's strengths are precisely the things that her family's framework does not know how to value. She is observant. She pays attention. She sees the cracks in the walls when everyone else is celebrating. She notices that Luisa is struggling when everyone else is relying on her. She sees that Isabela is performing happiness rather than feeling it. She sees that something is wrong with the magic lawn before anyone else is willing to admit it. These are the gifts of empathy and attention and honesty. They do not have dramatic visual manifestations. They do not make flowers bloom or mountains move, but they are what save the family in the end. Her arc is about learning to trust her own perceptions and her own value in the face of constant external messaging that she is not enough. It is a genuinely difficult art to pull off, and the film manages it beautifully. Abuela is voiced by María Cecilia Botero, a celebrated Colombian actress who brings enormous dignity and warmth and complexity to the role. The key challenge of playing Abuela is that she functions as the antagonist for much of the film, without ever being actually villainous. She never mistreats Mirabel through deliberate cruelty. She genuinely loves her granddaughter, but she also genuinely causes harm through neglect, through dismissal, through the unconscious communication that Mirabel's giftlessness makes her a problem rather than a gift. Understanding Abuela requires understanding trauma. What Abuela experienced when Pedro died was catastrophic. She was young. She was newly a mother. She was in the middle of a violent displacement, and she watched the person who was her entire world die in front of her to save her. That kind of loss, at that level of intensity, leaves marks that do not fade easily, and Abuela never processed those marks. She took the miracle that followed and threw herself into it completely, as a way of honoring Pedro's sacrifice, and also as a way of not having to feel the grief directly. Her demanding perfectionism, her controlling behavior, her insistence on maintaining the appearance of strength and capability and gratitude, all of this is a trauma response. She cannot afford to let the family be imperfect because imperfection, to her traumatized mind, is the precursor to loss. If she controls everything tightly enough, if everyone performs well enough, if the miracle is honored sufficiently, then perhaps it will not be taken away. Perhaps she will not lose everything again. This logic is understandable and also deeply dysfunctional, and the film shows us both things simultaneously. We understand Abuela. We feel for her. We do not hate her for what she has done to her family, but we also see clearly the damage her unprocessed fear has caused. And in the end, The film gives her something that many real people who have caused this kind of harm never receive: the opportunity to see what she has done clearly, to acknowledge it, and to begin to change. Luisa is voiced by Jessica Darrow, who delivers performance of tremendous physicality and emotional depth. Luisa is the strong one. She has been a strong one since her gift ceremony when she was 5, and the family realized they had a child who could lift buildings. She has been carrying things ever since. Not just physical things, but the emotional expectation of always being capable and never needing help. Surface Pressure is Luisa's song, and it deserves extensive analysis because it is one of the most psychologically sophisticated pieces of writing in any animated film ever made. The song uses a metaphor of physical pressure to describe emotional pressure. The grinding, building rhythm of the song mirrors the accumulating weight of expectation, and the lyrics go to places that are genuinely dark for a family film. Luisa describes the terror of losing control. She talks about the horror of what will happen to her if the weight disappears, if she is no longer needed, if she can no longer perform her function. Even the prospect of rest feels threatening, because her entire sense of identity is built on being useful. This is classic anxiety around self-worth being tied to productivity and usefulness. And it resonates enormously with audiences because it is so real and so rarely articulated so precisely. Many people, particularly eldest children caretakers, eldest daughters, perfectionists, and people with demanding jobs, recognize themselves in Luisa immediately and completely. Luisa's resolution in the film is subtle but significant. She does not get a dramatic arc of liberation like Isabela. She does not have a big emotional confrontation or revelation. But at the end of the film, when the magic returns, there is a moment where Luisa is shown relaxed, simply resting. And the fact that she can do this, that she can exist without performing strength, is her healing. Isabela is voiced by Diane Guerrero, a Colombian-American actress who is known primarily as a dramatic actress. And hearing her sing with this kind of joy and freedom in What Else Can I Do is a genuine revelation. Isabela's story is about the prison of perfection. She has been the golden child for so long that she has lost any sense of who she actually is underneath that role. She makes beautiful flowers because that is what is expected of her. She is going to marry Mariano because that is the appropriate next step for the perfect golden granddaughter. She smiles and blooms and is gracious and elegant because she has practiced being all of these things for so long that they no longer feel like a choice. What is fascinating about Isabela's arc is that her liberation does not come from anger. It comes from joy. When she finally makes a cactus instead of a rose, the expression on her face is not defiant or rebellious. It is joyful and surprised, like someone who has suddenly discovered that they are allowed to be themselves and cannot believe how good it feels. The detail that Isabela's freed magic includes not just cacti, but also tropical plants, climbing vines, strange mosses, hanging ferns, all the wild biodiversity of Colombia, rather than just the conventional roses she has always made, is deeply meaningful. Her gifts have always been rooted in the real natural world of Colombia. She was just making a very small and conventional subset of it. Her liberation is the liberation of her full creative range. Bruno is arguably the most beloved character in the film, which is somewhat surprising given that he does not appear until well into the second act. But when he appears, he is so immediately charming and so heartbreakingly lovable that he takes over every scene. Voiced by John Leguizamo, a Colombian-American actor of enormous talent and warmth, Bruno is a study in the experience of being punished for telling the truth. His gift was not dangerous. He could not control the future. He could only see it. But because the future often contained uncomfortable truths, people chose to blame the seer rather than confront the reality of what was seen. Bruno's rituals, the constant knocking on wood, the salt throwing, the elaborate good luck ceremonies he performs before almost any action, are a manifestation of his anxiety. He has spent his whole life feeling like a bad omen, and those feelings have calcified into obsessive behaviors designed to ward off the bad luck he has been told he causes. He carries enormous guilt for things that were never his fault. His relationship with his rats is one of the most quietly touching things in the film. He has given them names. He has taught them roles. He has been performing stories with them for years. This is not just whimsy, although it is certainly very funny. It is a portrait of a profoundly lonely person finding community in whatever form is available. His rats are his friends. They are his audience. They are the ones who listen to him, who depend on him, who show up for him every night when he performs his little telenovela. It is both charming and achingly sad. Dolores is one of the most interesting supporting characters in the film. She is voiced by Adassa, a Colombian singer, and her performance is understated and precise. Dolores can hear everything. She hears every secret, every whispered conversation, every heartbeat. She has been absorbing the information of the entire community for years without ever being given appropriate space to process or share what she knows. There is a quiet tragedy to Dolores' gift. She knew where Bruno was. She could hear him in the walls. She knew he had never left. She has been carrying that secret for years. She also clearly heard Mirabel's pain, Luisa's exhaustion, Isabella's suppressed unhappiness. She has been witness to everything, but in a family that operates by not talking about difficult things, her knowledge has no outlet. The small moments, and we don't talk about Bruno, where Dolores lets slip devastating pieces of information in a barely audible whisper, almost like she cannot help herself, are perfect character notes. She is someone who knows too much and has been asked to know quietly, to absorb everything and share nothing. Her storyline with Mariano, the man Isabel was supposed to marry, is very sweet. Dolores has been in love with him for a long time. Hearing his heartbeat change every time she is near, and the ending of the film where they end up together is one of its gentler joys. Camillo is Mirabel's cousin, the son of Pepe and Felix, and he can shapeshift. He is one of the younger Madrigal cousins, and he is written primarily as comic relief, though a charming and well-used variety of it. His shape-shifting gift is used brilliantly in the opening number to illustrate family members. He is mischievous and theatrical and deeply fun to watch. He does not receive a substantial emotional arc in the film, which some viewers have noted as a missed opportunity. But within the space he is given, he is a delight. Peppa controls the weather with her emotions, and she is a wonderful character who is simultaneously funny and quietly poignant. The notion of someone whose internal emotional life is literally externalized in the sky above them is a wonderful, magical, realist image. Peppa cannot have a bad day privately. When she is anxious, a cloud follows her. When she is furious, there is lightning. When she is happy, sunlight floods everything. The pressure this puts on her emotional life is significant. She has learned to manage her feelings carefully, to suppress negative emotions quickly, to maintain a kind of emotional regulation that is exhausting and never quite successful. Her relationship with Felix, her husband, is lovely. He is endlessly patient and warm, and he has clearly become a kind of emotional anchor for her. His role is essentially to help her weather her own weather, and he does it with love and humor. Mirabel's mother is perhaps the most straightforwardly good person in the film. She can heal people with food. She makes arepas that close wounds and cure illnesses. She is warm and nurturing and genuinely loves her daughter without condition or complication. Her relationship with Mirabel is the most uncomplicated, loving relationship in the film, and it serves as an emotional anchor for the audience. When the film gets very intense or very sad, the knowledge that Julieta is there, loving Mirabel completely, is a kind of comfort. Her relationship with Augustin, Mirabel's father, is also sweet and warm. He is accident-prone and clumsy, and she heals his various injuries with food she cooks, which is both a literal and metaphorical expression of how love works in the best relationships. Felix and Augustin are both men without magical gifts who have married into the Madrigal family. They are, in the context of the film's central themes, quietly significant characters. Here are two people who live in a magical family, who are loved and valued by that family, who have happy and fulfilling lives, and who have no gifts at all. They represent an answer to the central question the film is posing, which is whether a person can have value and belonging without extraordinary ability. The answer is clearly yes. But the film is gentle about pointing this out, and it never quite says explicitly in relation to Mirabel, leaving the viewer to make the connection themselves. Themes and symbolism. Encanto is one of the most thematically rich animated films Disney has ever made. Let us go through the major themes one by one with real depth and care. This is the central theme of the film, and it deserves the most attention. Generational trauma is the transmission of the psychological and emotional wounds of one generation to the next. It does not happen through deliberate cruelty. It happens through behaviors and beliefs that traumatized people develop to manage their pain, behaviors that then get passed on to their children and grandchildren as the normal way of operating in the world. Abuela Alma experienced catastrophic loss. She watched her husband die. She was displaced from her home. She was left alone with 3 infants in a hostile world. These experiences created in her a profound and permanent fear of losing everything. And the way she managed that fear was by controlling everything she could, especially her family. She taught her children, and through them her grandchildren, that their worth was in their usefulness, that love was contingent on performance, that the miracle was the most important thing in their world, and that they were its servants. She did not say these things explicitly. She probably would not have recognized them as beliefs she held, but she communicated them constantly and powerfully through what she rewarded and what she withheld approval for. The result was a family in which everyone was performing their role rather than living authentically. Luisa was performing strength. Isabela was performing perfection. Bruno had performed the role of the bad omen until he could not bear it anymore and disappeared. And Mirabel was performing adequacy, trying to prove her value in a system that had already decided she did not quite fit. The film argues that healing this kind of trauma requires 2 things. First, honesty. Someone has to be willing to name what is happening, to say clearly that something is wrong and that the family is suffering. Mirabel is that person. Second, and more importantly, healing requires a generation that caused the harm to see it, own it, and apologize for it. Abuela's scene at the river is that moment. When she says, "I am sorry," when she says, "I see what I did," when she acknowledges her granddaughter fully and completely, that is the moment of healing. Everything else, the rebuilding of the house, the return of the magic, the reconciliation with Bruno, all of this flows from that one honest moment. The film engages deeply with contemporary cultural obsession, with exceptional talent and extraordinary ability. In a world and a family where everyone is gifted, the person without a gift feels profoundly inadequate. But the film gradually reveals that even the people with gifts are suffering under them. The gifts are not simply joyful things. They are also burdens, expectations, identities that cannot easily be removed. Luisa does not just have strength. She is expected to always use it. Isabela does not just make flowers. She is expected to always make beautiful, conventional, approved flowers. Dolores does not just hear everything. She is expected to hear and absorb and keep quiet. The gifts are gifts, but they are also chains. They define each person, and in defining them, they limit them. The film argues that what matters is not the ability, but the person. Mirabel's value is not in some hidden power she is yet to unlock. Her value is in who she is, in her love, her honesty, her courage, her ability to see clearly. And the film resists the temptation, which would have been very easy to give into, of resolving her story by revealing a secret gift. She does not secretly have a power. The magic that returns at the end is not her gift specifically. The miracle returns because the family healed, and the family healed because of Mirabel's honesty and love and refusal to stop fighting for them. That is the conclusion. That is enough. That is more than enough. The Casita is perhaps the most sustained and beautiful piece of visual symbolism in the entire film. The house is the family. Its health mirrors the family's health. When the family is in harmony, the house is vibrant and magical and helpful and alive. When the family is fractured, the house cracks. When the family's illusion of perfection collapses, the house collapses. But there is a deeper layer to this symbolism. The Casita is not just a metaphor for the family. It is a metaphor for the family's relationship with the miracle itself. The miracle is what built the house. The miracle sustains it. And the miracle is built on the moment of Pedro's sacrifice, on the grief and love that Abuela poured into the world in her moment of greatest loss. When Abuela began to control the family out of fear, she was in a sense trying to control the miracle itself, trying to prevent it from ending. And the paradox, which the film reveals beautifully, is that her controlling behavior was actually what was killing the miracle. The miracle was not built on perfect performance. It was built on love, specifically on the love of a man who gave everything so that his family could survive. That kind of love is generous and sacrificial and open. Abuela's fearful control was the opposite of that love, and the magic responded by dying. When the family heals, When Abuela finally opens up and becomes vulnerable and honest, when Mirabel forgives and connects, the miracle returns. Not because anyone performed it correctly, but because love was finally being practiced again in the way it was always meant to be. One of the film's most subtle themes is the danger of making your gift your identity. Every member of the Madrigal family who has a gift has allowed that gift to become the primary way they understand themselves. Luisa is the strong one. Isabela is the beautiful, perfect one. Dolores is the hearing one. They have stopped being full people and have become their abilities. This is a very contemporary anxiety. In a world that constantly asks us to define ourselves by what we can do and produce and achieve, the idea of a person who is their gift rather than a person who has a gift is painfully relevant. The loss of their gifts at the film's crisis point is traumatic for the family, but it is also ultimately liberating. For the first time, they have to engage with each other as people rather than as collections of abilities. And what they find when they do that is that they like each other, that they love each other, that the family is actually wonderful even without the magic. Bruno's prophetic gift is a very specific kind of metaphor. He can see uncomfortable truths before they arrive, and he cannot help reporting what he sees. His punishment by the family and the community is the punishment of the truth-teller, the whistleblower, the person who refuses to pretend that everything is fine when it is clearly not fine. This is a theme that runs through a lot of Colombian literature, and indeed through the broader tradition of magical realism. The idea that reality itself is uncomfortable and that society often chooses to punish the people who name that discomfort rather than address the discomfort directly. Bruno is a walking embodiment of that idea. He sees clearly. He tells the truth. He is exiled for it. But notice that his visions did not cause any of the bad things that happened. His vision of rain at Pepa's wedding did not cause the rain. Pepa's anxiety about the vision caused the rain, because her anxiety is what creates her storms. Bruno's vision was a report of an emotional reality, not a prophecy of supernatural doom. If Pepa had simply been able to manage her anxiety, there would have been no rain. Bruno was not the problem. The family's inability to handle difficult information was the problem. Filmmaking techniques. Let's now go very deep into how this movie was made, technically and artistically. The animation in Encanto represents the state of the art in computer-generated animated filmmaking as of 2021. Walt Disney Animation Studios has been developing its animation technology for decades, and the system they use for Encanto, called Hyperion, is capable of simulating light with extraordinary physical accuracy. This means that the light in Encanto does not just look pretty. It behaves the way real light behaves. It bounces off surfaces. It scatters through fabrics. It changes color as it passes through leaves and flowers and water. The result is a film that has the visual richness of a live-action film while retaining the expressive freedom of animation. Characters can be slightly exaggerated in design and movement while existing in environments that feel genuinely real. The Encanto feels like a place you could visit. The mountains look like real mountains. The plants look like real plants. The food looks genuinely appetizing. Hair and fabric simulation were two areas where the film set new standards. Mirabel's wild. Curly hair require a new simulation system because curly hair behaves very differently from straight or wavy hair. It bounces differently. It responds differently to movement. The same was true for Isabella's long straight hair and for the various curls and braids worn by other family members. Getting hair to look and move correctly for a diverse cast of characters with diverse hair types required significant technical innovation. The clothing in the film also pushed boundaries. The embroidered details on Mirabel's skirt, which as mentioned earlier actually depicts members of her family in its patterns, had to be rendered with thread-level accuracy. You can see individual threads. You can see the slight dimensional quality of embroidery, the way the thread sits slightly above the fabric surface. This level of detail is remarkable, and it serves the story because it helps communicate the deep cultural authenticity of the film. Building the Casita required an entirely new approach to animation. The house had to feel alive and responsive without being distracting. It needed to communicate emotion and intent without having a face. The animators developed a system in which different parts of the house could respond independently to the emotional states of characters nearby. Tiles could lift and create steps. Stairs could rearrange themselves. Windows could open and close. The The whole structure could breathe and shudder and shake with something like feeling. The key challenge was making the house feel like it had a personality, without making it feel too anthropomorphized. The house is not a person. It is a house, but it loves the Madrigals. It wants to help them. When it collapses at the film's crisis point, the collapse has emotional weight because we have come to feel the house as a character over the course of the film. Each GIF in the film has its own visual language, and the design team was clearly very deliberate about making each magical expression feel distinctive. Luisa's strength magic is grounded in physical and gravity-laden. When she lifts something, you feel the weight. When her power fades, there's a specific visual quality to that, a kind of gray softening of her outlines. Isabella's flower magic is fluid and organic, like animation of an accelerated growth process, plants shooting up and blooming in seconds. When she starts making her new wild plants, the animation shifts subtly, becoming a little more unpredictable and three-dimensional. Dolores' hearing ability is expressed through visual spirals of sound waves emanating from her, golden and delicate. Camillo's shape-shifting is rubbery and fluid, slightly uncanny in the best way. The GIF visions of Bruno are handled with a specific visual palette, deep green and glowing, with the shards of glass that contain the visions having the quality of caught light. When Mirabel and Bruno piece the vision together, the assembly process has a feeling of magical puzzle, fragments of green light clicking into place to reveal an image. The color design of Encanto is extraordinary. The film uses color not just as decoration, but as a language. The warm golds and reds and oranges of the Casita interiors communicate safety and warmth and the busy richness of family life. The lush greens and blues and purples of the surrounding mountains and jungle communicate the magical abundance of the Encanto. The specific colors associated with each family member's gift, the warm yellow-orange of Luisa's power, the pink and white of Isabella's flowers, the golden spirals of Dolores' hearing, the green of Bruno's visions. All of these are distinctive and memorable and help the audience keep track of who has what power in a large cast. As the magic begins to fail in Act 2, the color design shifts subtly but noticeably. Colors become slightly more desaturated. The golden light of the Casita becomes more gray. The flowers look slightly less vivid. This visual cooling mirrors the failing of the miracle and emotional withdrawal of the family from one another. When the magic returns at the end, the colors come back with even more intensity and variety than before. Isabella's new wildflowers and plants bring in a much broader palette than her original roses, deep reds and purples, and the rich green of tropical plants. And this visual explosion of color signals that the family's liberation is genuine and permanent. Lin-Manuel Miranda is one of the most gifted musical theater composers working today. He created Hamilton, the groundbreaking hip-hop musical about the founding father Alexander Hamilton, and In the Heights, the musical about life in a Dominican-American neighborhood in New York. Both of these works demonstrate his ability to use music to tell culturally specific stories with emotional precision and theatrical grandeur. Encanto gave him the opportunity to do something similar in an animated format, and he rose to the occasion magnificently. Miranda wrote 8 original songs for film. Let's go through each one in detail. The opening number is a masterpiece of exposition. It has to do an enormous amount of work, introducing the world, the family, the concept of magical gifts, and the central wound of the protagonist, all in the space of a few minutes. And it does all this while also being genuinely entertaining and catchy. Miranda uses a kind of breathless, almost rap-inflected rhythm from Mirabel's voice that immediately characterizes her as someone quick-witted and slightly chaotic, and deeply invested in the story she is telling. The way the song keeps almost answering the question of Mirabel's gift and then deflecting is both funny and quietly heartbreaking. We don't talk about Bruno as the showpiece of the film's score, and it deserves detailed analysis. The song is structured as a multi-character musical sequence in which 6 different characters each contribute a verse or section, and each section has a distinct musical style that reflects the personality and emotional state of the singer. Pepa's section has a slightly chaotic, emotionally unstable quality. The rhythm shifts slightly as her weather does, which is a brilliant piece of musical characterization. Dolores sings in a hushed, intimate, slightly eerie style that captures her quality of someone who always seems to know more than she is supposed to know. Camillo's section is theatrical and slightly over the top, using a dramatic minor key that is slightly operatic. Isabella's section is cool and elegant and controlled, her voice perfectly measured even while delivering fairly dramatic information. The town baker and the other villagers provide a kind of Greek chorus function, their sections grounding the song in the community context. Then these threads all start weaving together in the final chorus in a way that is compositionally extraordinary. Different characters are singing different melodies simultaneously, their stories overlapping and commenting on each other, and Miranda manages to make this complex weave feel not just musically coherent, but emotionally coherent too. The different threads of Bruno's stories, all of them really about avoidance and blame, coming together in the final chorus is the musical equivalent of what the film is doing thematically throughout its whole runtime. The song went #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 2022, the first Disney song to reach that position since the early 1990s. It was streamed billions of times across platforms. It was everywhere. For several months in early 2022, it was almost impossible to go online without encountering it in some form. Luisa's song is the emotional gut punch of the first half of the film. Miranda uses a driving, rhythmically complex style that incorporates elements of Latin music, while also suggesting the relentless mechanical pressure of Luisa's daily life. The tempo is relentless. The arrangement gets progressively more cluttered and overwhelming as the song builds, adding more layers of sound until it feels almost oppressive, which is of course exactly the point. The lyrics are the work of someone who deeply understands anxiety and burnout. Miranda describes in very specific, very honest terms what it feels like to be the reliable one, to be the person on whom everything rests, to be unable to admit weakness or ask for help, because a whole structure depends on you maintaining the illusion of strength. The song does not offer easy comfort. It sits in the discomfort and describes it precisely. Isabella's liberation song is a joyful explosion after the accumulated weight of surface pressure, and we don't talk about Bruno. It is a song that Encanto most needed at the point in the story where it arrives, a moment of genuine, uncomplicated, liberating joy. The music incorporates Colombian rhythms and has a kind of tropical exuberance that mirrors the wild botanical creativity happening on screen. It is a shorter song than the others, but it does not need to be long. It needs to be free and exuberant and surprising, and it is all of those things. This is Mirabel's internal song, the moment where she finally sings openly about her loneliness and her longing to belong. It is the most vulnerable song in the film, and it is sung at a moment when Mirabel is watching the rest of her family celebrate together, feeling separated from them by the invisible wall of her giftlessness. The song is beautiful and understated. It does not build to a big theatrical climax. It sits in the sadness with honesty and grace. This is not a song about self-pity. It is a song about longing, specifically the longing to be truly included, to be truly seen, to be truly enough. Stephanie Beatrice's vocal performance is extraordinary in this moment. The Spanish-language song, performed by Colombian singer Sebastian Yatra, plays over a flashback sequence showing Abuela Alma and Pedro's story. The title means two caterpillars, and the metaphor of the song is about transformation, about the process of change and loss and emergence. Two caterpillars must let go of each other in order to become butterflies. The sacrifice of letting go is what allows something new to come into being. This is a metaphor both for Pedro's sacrifice and for the transformation that Abuela and Mirabel must both undergo in order for the family to heal. The song is in Spanish, which is a significant creative decision. Having the most emotionally crucial backstory song performed in Spanish rather than English is a statement about cultural identity and authenticity. This is a Colombian story. The deepest emotional truth of it should be expressed in the language of that culture. Dos Oruguitas was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song, and Sebastian Yatra's performance of it at the ceremony was one of the most moving moments of that broadcast. The closing song, performed by Carlos Vives, a legendary Colombian musician, is a warm and celebratory number that serves as both an epilogue to the story and a love letter to Colombia itself. Having Vives perform the closing song is another statement of cultural authenticity and respect. Vives is one of the most beloved musical figures in Colombian history. His presence in the film, even just in this closing number, signals to Colombian audiences that the film was made with genuine love and knowledge of their culture. The score, the underscore of the film, the music that plays beneath the action, and dialogue when there are no songs, was composed by Jermaine Franco. Franco is a Colombian-American composer, and her score incorporates authentic Colombian instruments and musical traditions throughout. The marimba, a wooden percussion instrument with deep roots in Colombian Pacific Coast music, is featured prominently. Gaita flutes, traditional indigenous wind instruments, appear in several sequences. Cumbia rhythms, which are central to Colombian popular music, run throughout the score. Having a Colombian-American composer write the score, using Colombian instruments and traditions as the foundation of the musical language of the entire film, was a significant creative choice that reinforces the cultural specificity and authenticity of the work as a whole. Critical response and audience reaction. The film was released in theaters on November 24th, 2021. The timing was interesting because the market was still in a period of uncertainty and flux due to the ongoing pandemic. Audiences were still somewhat hesitant to return to theaters in large numbers for family films, particularly as the Omicron variant of the coronavirus was beginning to emerge in late 2021. The theatrical box office was, as a result, somewhat disappointing by the standards of major Disney animated features. The film earned approximately $256 million globally during its theatrical run, against a production budget estimated at around $120 million and a marketing budget that pushed the total investment considerably higher. For context, Moana, which Encanto was often compared to given its cultural specificity and musical depth, earned around $643 million globally. Zootopia, directed by Byron Howard, earned over $1 billion. However, the box office numbers tell only a small part of the story of Encanto's reception and cultural impact. When the film arrived on Disney Plus on December 24th, 2021, the response was immediate and extraordinary. Families who had not seen it in theaters watched it at home. Then they watched it again. Then their children watched it repeatedly. The songs, particularly We Don't Talk About Bruno and Surface Pressure, began to spread virally on social media platforms. TikTok was flooded with people lip-syncing to and recreating scenes from the film. YouTube clips of the songs accumulated hundreds of millions of views within weeks. By January and February of 2022, Encanto was the most watched film on Disney+. The songs were dominating streaming music charts. We Don't Talk About Bruno reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on January 29, 2022. This was the first time a Disney animated song had reached that position on the chart since A Whole New World from Aladdin in 1993. The song stayed on the chart for weeks and was streamed over 5 billion times on Spotify alone within the first few months of its release. Surface Pressure also charted extremely well and became a particularly powerful cultural touchstone for discussions of mental health, burnout, and the specific pressure of being a reliable person in a family or workplace. The song was discussed in mainstream news articles, in therapy contexts, in academic papers about family dynamics. It inspired countless social media posts in which people described their own experiences with the feelings the song expressed. The critical reception was excellent from the start. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a 91% approval rating from professional critics, with the critical consensus praising the animation, the music, the cultural authenticity, and the emotional complexity of the story. Many critics called it the best Disney animated film since Moana or Zootopia, or even Frozen. Some placed it among the best animated films of the decade. The Hollywood Reporter called it a dazzling achievement in both technique and emotional storytelling. Variety praised the film's willingness to engage with the complexity of family relationships without simplifying them or providing easy resolutions. The New York Times wrote with particular enthusiasm about the cultural authenticity of the film and the significance of seeing Colombian culture represented so lovingly and specifically in a major studio animated feature. Audience reception was very strong as well, with an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes hovering around 90%. User reviews frequently mentioned the emotional impact of the film, with many viewers describing being surprised by how deeply moved they were. The film was seen as working on multiple levels simultaneously, as a children's adventure, as a family drama, as a cultural celebration, and as a sophisticated meditation on intergenerational trauma. That it managed all four things at once was cited repeatedly as evidence of its remarkable craft. The film won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature at the 94th Academy Award ceremony in March 2022, defeating a strong field that included Flea, Luca, The Mitchells versus the Machines and Raya and The Last Dragon. It also won the Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature. At the Annie Awards, which are specifically focused on animation, it won multiple prizes, including Outstanding Achievement for Feature. The awards recognition was significant not just for the film itself, but for the people who made it. Cherise Castro-Smith, as a co-writer of a Best Animated Feature winner, became one of the few Latinas to have achieved that distinction. The cast, composed largely of Colombian and Colombian-American performers, received wide recognition and appreciation. The win was celebrated broadly in the Colombian community and in the broader Latinx community as a meaningful moment of recognition for their cultural contributions to mainstream cinema. Criticisms were relatively few, but worth acknowledging. Some critics felt that the film had too many characters for its running time of just under 100 minutes, and that several of the Madrigal family members received insufficient development. Characters like Camilo and Antonio, and even Felix and Augustine, are charming when on screen, but do not receive meaningful arcs of their own. This is a structural challenge inherent in telling a story about a family of this size, and the filmmakers clearly made deliberate choices about which characters to focus on most deeply, with Mirabel, Abuela, Luisa, Isabela, and Bruno receiving the most substantial treatment. Some viewers also felt that the connection between Mirabel's reconciliation with Isabela and the physical healing of the magic was not entirely clearly drawn. The vision Bruno showed said that Isabela was somehow the key, and then the path to restoring the magic somehow goes through Abuela rather than directly through Isabela, and the logic of this transition is a little fluid. It is not a significant plot flaw, but it is one of few areas where the screenplay's construction feels slightly loose. A minority of critics felt that the film's themes, while genuine and meaningful, were perhaps stated too explicitly at times, that the dialogue occasionally became too on the nose in articulating what the metaphors and the music had already expressed visually and musically. But this was a small criticism in the context of overwhelmingly positive reception. Let us return to the ending of the film and explore it in more depth, because it rewards close attention. After Mirabel places a doorknob on the new Casita and the magic returns, there is a sequence of moments that each deserve individual attention. The return of Isabela's powers is specifically shown to be different from what they were before. The flowers she creates are not just roses and conventional blooms. They are wild and varied and strange and joyful. This visual detail confirms that the liberation she experienced in Act 2 was real and permanent. She is not going back to performing perfection. Her magic has changed because she has changed. Luisa's return of power is shown through a subtle moment where she is asked to do something heavy, and she does it easily, but then pauses and sets it down, not because she cannot carry it, but because she is choosing not to always carry everything. This is a small moment and easy to miss, but it is significant. Luisa is not just getting her strength back. She is getting her agency back, the ability to choose when to be strong rather than always being required to be. Bruno's homecoming is handled with beautiful simplicity. He steps back into the family home, and his sisters see him, and they hold him. No long speech, no complicated reconciliation scene, just love, just a recognition that whatever he did, whatever complicated feelings a family has about his visions and his disappearance, they love him and they want him home. This is a resolution of his storyline, and it is earned and beautiful. The town's participation in rebuilding the Casita is a crucial detail that elevates the ending beyond a purely family story. The Encanto community has always benefited from the Madrigal magic. Julieta healed them. Luisa helped them. Isabela's flowers beautified their town. But here the community gives back. They show up with their hands and their tools and their presence. They build the house together. This is the film's vision of what community actually means, not just a group of people who receive services from a magical family, but a genuine community of mutual support and care. Mirabel's door and magical room are the culminating image of the film's resolution. She never had them before. She has them now. But it is important to note what they represent. They do not represent a previously hidden gift finally being unlocked. They represent the family's acknowledgement of her. Her door, her room, her place in the magical house. These are the family finally fully recognizing her belonging. They are not magic in the power sense. They are magic in the love sense. The question of what Mirabel's gift actually is continues to be discussed by viewers and by people who analyze the film, and the filmmakers have been deliberately ambiguous about it in interviews. Some argue that her gift is a casita itself, that she becomes a keeper of the house. Some argue that her gift is love or empathy or the ability to hold a family together. Some argue that she has no gift in the traditional sense, and that is precisely the point. The most satisfying interpretation, and the one most consistent with the film's themes, is that Mirabel's gift is her wholeness. While every other Madrigal was given a specific, limited, defined ability, Mirabel was given nothing, which meant she had to develop everything. She had to be perceptive because she could not rely on supernatural senses. She had to be empathetic because she had no power to substitute for genuine connection. She had to be brave because she had no gift to protect her. She had to be honest because she had no magical way to solve problems. She is the most fully human person in the film. And in a story about what happens when a family mistakes superpowers for worth, the most fully human person turns out to be exactly what the family needs. Sequel possibility and the future of the franchise. As of early 2026, Disney has not officially announced a sequel to Encanto. The filmmakers and producers have given interviews in which they have acknowledged that fans are interested in seeing more of the Madrigals, but have been carefully non-committal about whether a sequel is coming. From a purely financial and business perspective, the enormous streaming success of the film and the global cultural phenomenon of its music absolutely justify the development of a sequel. The characters are beloved. The world is rich with unexplored territory. There is clearly an audience. But from a storytelling perspective, a sequel faces the classic challenge of any story that had a definitive emotional resolution. The story of Encanto is complete. The family healed. The magic returned. Mirabel found her place. Abuela confronted her trauma. Bruno came home. What does a sequel tell? There are some possibilities. The world beyond the Encanto has never been explored. What happens when a magical family finally ventures beyond their hidden valley? What challenges arise when the outside world encounters the Madrigals? There are also characters who received almost no development in the first film. Camillo in particular, who could sustain an entire subplot in a sequel. And there is a question of the next generation. What happens as the current young Madrigals grow up? What gifts their children might receive? But the strongest argument against a sequel is the same argument that the best standalone films always make, which is that the story was complete as told, and adding more risks diluting what made it special. Encanto works because every element serves its central emotional truth. A sequel would need an equally profound central emotional truth to justify its existence, not just more adventures with characters we love. Whether or not a sequel comes, what is certain is that Encanto's place in the canon of great animated films is secure. It will be watched and loved and discussed for decades. Conclusion. So what is Encanto, finally? What does it add up to? What does it mean, and why should you care? Encanto is a film about the human need to be truly seen. Not seen for what you can do. Not seen for how well you perform your designated role. But truly seen as you actually are in your complexity, in your ordinariness, in your love, and your fear. Every character in the film is yearning for this kind of seeing. Mirabel wants it from her family. Luisa wants it from the people who depend on her. Isabela wants it from the grandmother who has always defined her as perfect. Bruno wanted it from the family that made him feel like a bad omen. And Abuela, the grandmother who has been the source of so much of the family's pain, ultimately needs it too. She needs to be seen as a terrified and grieving woman who did the best she could and still caused harm. She needs to be loved not in spite of her failings, but through them. What the film does so beautifully is argue that this kind of seeing, this honest and loving attention, is itself a form of magic, more powerful than any supernatural gift, more transformative than any miracle. When Mirabel finally sees her grandmother clearly, when she understands the grief and the fear underneath the control, and chooses to love her anyway, the miracle returns. Not because anything physically changed, but because the love that was the source of miracle all along, the love of Pedro for Abuela, the love that sacrifice expressed, that love was finally being practiced again in the family it created. The film is also a love letter to Colombia, to Colombian culture, to the Colombian family unit, to the Colombian landscape in botany and music. In making a film this specific, this culturally grounded, Disney did something genuinely unusual and genuinely valuable. They said that this particular culture, this particular country, This particular family's story deserves the full power of cinematic storytelling. Not a generic fantasy backdrop with some color, but a real and specific and lovingly rendered world. And Colombian audiences responded with enormous pride and joy. The music of the film, Lin-Manuel Miranda's greatest achievement in film, is simultaneously entertained and educational. It teaches you about the characters. It reveals what they cannot say in dialogue. It carries the emotional weight of the film, and it does so in a way that is both intellectually sophisticated and immediately emotionally accessible. That a song about the pressure of being the reliable one in your family, surface pressure, became a global viral sensation is not surprising when you listen to it closely. It is saying things that millions of people feel, but rarely hear said so precisely and so beautifully. The film has limitations. It has too many characters for its running time to fully develop. Some of its plot mechanics are slightly loose. Some of its dialogue is perhaps slightly over-explanatory. But these are small things against the enormous achievement of what the film does successfully. If you have not seen Encanto, you should watch it. You should watch it with your family, if you have one. You should watch it twice, because the second viewing is richer than the first. Pay attention to the cracks the first time they appear. Pay attention to what each gift tells you about the person who has it and the role they have been assigned in the family. Pay attention to Bruno's rituals and what they say about his anxiety. Pay attention to the way the Casita moves and responds. Pay attention to the color of the light in different sequences and how it changes as the story progresses. Pay attention to Mirabel's clothing, the embroidery that depicts her family, the love stitched into every panel of her skirt. And pay attention to the river scene, the scene between Mirabel and Abuela Alma, and let yourself feel everything is offering you, because Encanto is offering something rare in cinema of any kind, animated or otherwise. It is offering an honest and loving and beautifully made story about how families hurt each other, and how families heal each other, and how the two things are inseparable, and how the possibility of healing is always present as long as there is at least one person willing to be honest enough to begin it. That is Encanto. That is what it is and what it does and why it matters. Thank you for staying with this script all the way through. If you found something in here that resonated with you, if something in the film's themes touched your own experience, please share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which character felt most like someone you know. Tell us which song you have been singing in the shower for the past year. Tell us whether you watched it and thought of someone you love. And if there is someone in your life who needs to see this film, reach out to them today and watch it together, because some stories are better when they are shared.